It's our first milestone, 5 episodes of the Football Fun Factory podcast, and it feels like we've been doing this forever. In a good way, of course. Today on the Football Fun Factory podcast, we will be discussing the very serious subject of the abuse of referees at all levels of the game. It's a problem that seems to be getting worse, and surely more needs to be done to drive it out of the game. In a recent survey, 1,000 active grassroots referees were asked about the abuse they had received. And of the 927 respondents, 908 said they'd experienced verbal abuse from either spectators, players, coaches or managers. 778 had been sworn at while officiating, while 375 had received personal abuse about things like their appearance, gender, race or sexual orientation. Scary numbers that a third of those answering the questions have received personal abuse. Or are the referees should be expecting this in the heat of the moment when passions are running high and accept at times they are going to be questioned? Without the referee, there is no game. And with the recent rise in the abuse of referees, surely that's putting off people wanting to get involved in officiating and will eventually lead to a real problem and lack of referees. Let's delve a little deeper. Johnny, have you ever shouted at a ref?
Unfortunately, yes. I think probably in my time as a fan, I definitely would have done. Go to see Spurs, probably on the sideline you disagree with, or in the stands you disagree with a decision that's been made, and like you said, in the passion of the moment you probably do. I'm ashamed to say that I have called on and probably said a rude word or two maybe. Coaching wise, I can't think of a time where I've shouted on necessarily and said anything. I
think you're so conscious of it, aren't you?
Yeah.
So when you're coaching children, you're so conscious of the fact that if you shout at the ref, you're just teaching them to do so. So I think it's really important that as a coach, it's really interesting that actually you have a completely different mindset. You're thinking about how you're a role model, but then you can go to a stadium on a Saturday afternoon and be the complete opposite.
Yeah, interesting stuff. It is an incredibly serious subject to speak about, and we are gonna put it on trial. Welcome back to Chaddy's Court, where we're going to be putting the very serious subject of referees' abuse on trial. For those listening in, I'm again dressed up in this ridiculous judge's outfit. I'm now going to give James and Johnny contrasting opinions on this subject, and they are going to argue their point regardless of whether they agree with it or not. James?
This is another stitch up.
James, I'm going to ask you to read out your statement first.
Yes. That's the start of the statement. Yes, I believe the only way to increase the standard of refereeing is to criticise every decision that they make, loudly and aggressively.
I'm a little bit disappointed to hear you say that, James. Is that the end of your statement? John?
No! That's how the statement starts. Yeah. The referee is there to facilitate a match for everybody to enjoy, and within youth football will be on a development journey themselves and should be able to ref without the fear of every decision being scrutinised.
Interesting stuff, guys. James, I'm going to ask you to take the stand first, and Johnny, I'm going to give you the opportunity to question James on his rather outrageous opening statement.
So when I formulated this statement, I drew on my own experiences as a referee. So I was a young referee taking the game for the first time. I gave a dodgy penalty. I actually talked about it on this podcast a couple of episodes ago. And I then, from that point forward, was very, very conscious of the decisions that I was making. In the absence of making mistakes and the mistakes being highlighted, then I wouldn't have improved. And that's what football is all about, isn't it? It's all about, we talk all the time about people having the ability to make mistakes. And if you don't highlight those mistakes, then how are people ever going to get better? So to just allow referees to just get away with making mistakes, giving penalties when it shouldn't be, giving someone a booking when it should have been a red, you have to highlight them. You have to tell them they've got it wrong. Otherwise, the standard of refereeing is just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse, and it's ruining the game.
Interesting stuff, James. Johnny, you got any questions to throw?
I mean, you've committed to the cause, fair play. But when you were a ref and you said that the decision was sort of, well, people on the sideline were giving you a bit of abuse because you made the wrong decision.
Yeah.
How did you feel after that?
I said thank you.
If we look back at a few podcasts ago, I don't believe you did say thank you.
So I didn't say thank you at the time. I thought, do you know what? That's pretty tough, that. But it was a tough development journey for me.
Are you still a passionate referee now, following those early
I don't
childhood
have the time
experiences?
to referee games anymore at the
If
moment.
you did, would you?
Absolutely, I would. Yeah, I'd love to referee a game, and I think that it's a great way to get feedback and to keep improving.
I thought we were under oath, and it seems like it might be a lie, James.
It's not a lie. I firmly believe in this cause.
He's arguing for his point, which is perfectly fine, Johnny. I had to tell you last week when you got too into it.
Raucous.
Yeah, good word. Well done. Okay, John?
It seems like there's a bit of an agenda against me here.
No, not at all.
So
Statement, please.
I believe that a referee is there to facilitate a match for everybody to enjoy. Without the referees, as you quite rightly said, Sir Luke, Judge Chadwick, at the start of the podcast today, without the referee, there is no game. They are on a development journey. It is all part of... Mistakes are part of life. Everyone makes mistakes throughout their whole life, whether it be in football or not, and that is part of the development journey that we all go on, and it's really important that people don't hurl abuse at referees because they're doing their very best.
Questions?
Have you ever experienced a referee's decision that has ruined a game of football?
I'm a Spurs fan, and I have experienced quite a lot of controversial decisions. One that I always think back to, Pedro Mendes against Man United. The ball went clearly foot and a half beyond the line.
I'm not sure it went over the line. Roy Carroll's got back there and kept it out.
It was quite clearly over the line at the time. So I have experienced lots of that, yeah.
So surely that contrasts completely with your view that referees should be able to make any mistakes they want, just get away with it and bowl around as if nothing's happened.
But I think there were sort of ramifications of that, or there was like big talking point, a big discussion point
Should be
after
ramifications,
that.
Johnny.
However, it's not the end of the world. It's just a game of football.
So if that happens the next week. So my statement was all about, making sure that people know that they've not done the right thing. How can you just continue to make mistakes week on week on week?
But it's part of the development
turning
journey.
up to the podcast and just keep wearing the judge's outfit every single week, and just nobody tells them how ridiculous it looks.
I don't have to wear this.
It's what happens.
I had to wear
What's
this.
happening week on week.
It just feels like now you're abusing Chad.
The number of viewers.
Yeah.
The number of viewers is dwindling.
Enough of that, James. Okay, are you finished, or are you ready for me to make my decision?
So I just think one final statement is I think that there is at no point should be any abuse held at referees. Over to you, Sir Luke Chadwick.
Okay, I'm going to make my decision now, and I think everyone watching or listening will know there's only one winner of today's debate.
Absolutely.
Obviously, it's not you, James. So, Johnny, congratulations.
Get in.
Take the medal. Wear it with pride. Congratulations.
Oh, lovely.
Well done, Johnny.
Thanks,
Congratulations on the win. Let's have a little bit more of a serious chat about it now. So, James, obviously you don't believe...
I hope not.
I
do
believe. But give us a little bit of a view on what you think of the situation at the moment that seems to be getting worse with the abuse of referees, particularly in grassroots football.
So I think the biggest contrast is between football and rugby for me, where you see exactly the same profile of person watching, participating, officiating within the sport, but a completely different culture that sits around it. We've seen rugby referees that are mic'd up, and even the viewers at home when TV games are on, and there's no swearing, there's no hurling abuse. The stat you gave at the start was that virtually every referee has been sworn at. It's an absolute disgrace, and it shouldn't happen.
But how do you change that culture that's so embedded into football? Like, how do you ever? I mean, I don't ever see it changing. So football is like rugby, and you get that huge amount of discipline within the sport from the players, particularly in the game, in the heat of the moment.
I think things can change because I probably never saw the female game developing in the way that it has. So I always hoped, obviously, that there'd be a huge development in the female game, but sometimes there's just a catalyst and things can happen. Ultimately, there needs to be some form of big intervention. The big intervention in the female game was kind of television rights and opportunities and scaling up the opportunity really for women to play football, girls and women to play football. I think there has to be some sort of big intervention, because ultimately there needs to be a shock to the system for anything that's historic and has rumbled on for years and years and years to change. There needs to be a big intervention of some kind that can only really come from the authorities.
But where does that intervention come? Does that come right at the very top, or is it more right at the very bottom, and the education of coaches, children coming into football to make that a long-term vision, or something at the top where if any player argues with a referee, they're sent off immediately to make a statement?
It has to come from the top down.
Yeah.
It has to come from the
rule
Premier
changes.
League. Yeah. Well, I think if for example, tomorrow all the refs were mic'd up and you could hear live, like they do in rugby, when it goes to the ref and you can hear them speaking, suddenly that just changes it all dramatically from the get-go, doesn't it?
But you couldn't do that on TV right now, because it would...
Why not?
Because straight away you'd have people effing and blinding on TV. Like I was watching
but then if you just stamped it out, so it was like as soon as that happens, it's a yellow card, and then there was like a full discipline on it, and it just isn't accepted, and that was because that's what it needs, isn't it? It needs a drastic
it needs a
change, and needs a shock to the system, like you say. And I think if that were the case, that no swearing like they do in rugby. And you often hear like clips go viral on social media of like refs talking in rugby. And there was one recently that I saw, and the ref said, "Don't speak to me like that." And the guy was like, "I'm sorry, sir." And then like addressed him properly and everything else. And then they got to the end of that scenario and they parted ways and carried on with the game. And I think that has to happen in football to make a change to go all the way down to grassroots, because the stats you read at the start are absolutely criminal. It's disgusting, isn't it? Like, the thing that many people in grassroots, a lot volunteering their time and getting that level of abuse.
But that's where that's where them statistics come from grassroots football. Obviously, you say it starts from the top and that sort of thing. But is it always on the pitch that this is happening? From my experience, the biggest challenges within grassroots football probably come from the side of the pitch, more so than those participating within the game on the pitch.
But the problem is, at the moment, at the very top level, so on Sky Sports News, the referee, that Monday Night Football, the game goes on. After the game, they then stand and assess the decisions that the ref has made, that are good or bad, and that then almost makes it it does for the next week, a talking point, the referee's decision.
We got high-profile players who, as a player, shouted at the ref or whatever it might be, surrounded the referee and all those kind of things. And then now, 10 years later, they're sitting in the studio still criticising the referee.
But is that a massive issue in terms of, on a TV show, discussion, as they discuss the players, the mistakes that they've made, what's happened within the game? It's more... The problem's the emotional side of it, isn't it? Whether you're a player on the pitch, a coach, a parent watching your child play football.
I think it's all linked, and it has to be a series of measures. So to answer your original question, I agree, John, it has to be driven down from the top, because that's the most influential place for it to be driven from, and driven down into grassroots. But it needs to be a whole series of interventions driven from the top. So it's like, from this point forward, this is what happens. From this point forward, the TV broadcasters, we can't talk about the referee in that way. From this point forward, any manager that's interviewed after a game says anything about the referee gets serious consequences, because that's the only way you look at carrot and stick, don't you? You can educate people and tell them, don't have a go at the ref and all this, but that's the nicey bit, but it hasn't worked.
To caveat though, and do a full circle, like you said in the Chaddy's Court earlier on, some of the mistakes that are being made are costing people like championships, like at the end of the season, if there are dodgy decisions that have been made or lots of repeat mistakes. The problem is with football and other sports that we look at, like, so you mentioned rugby earlier on, they can go to the big screen and it's a black and white decision whether it's a try or not. Tennis is the same, like Hawkeye and everything, and cricket, like...
But even that's wrong sometimes. So even in those scenarios, then there's like Hawkeye decisions that are overruled by the umpire. and there's things like that the technology is never 100%.
No, in things like cricket and stuff, like the umpire. Well, maybe I'm not that well, but you're the cricket man.
He's the cricket man.
But when the umpire will make a decision, and then it will go to
I think we're
to the
sort of
check
getting
after.
away from the subject a little bit in terms of referees are going to make mistakes, aren't they? As players are going to make mistakes, as we're all going to make mistakes till the end of time. I think the subject that we're talking about is the abuse of referees, and for me, I probably look at it a little bit differently from the fact where I think there's a huge issue, as we read in the statistics at the start, in grassroots football. I think that's where the massive problem is, where obviously these are not highly trained, highly qualified referees. These are often young people coming into the game looking to referee, maybe for a little bit of money, maybe because they want to build a career in it, but they are falling out the game incredibly quickly because of the abuse that is received.
So what would you do if you're in charge of a intervention, or you're in charge of a project to try and improve that? What would be the steps that you would take?
But I think there has to be a zero tolerance on the abuse of referees, and like how it sounds.
I think there is,
but I don't think there is. I think there's children's football getting played where parents, coaches are screaming at the referees because it's so important. When I coach football, I would moan at the referee. What a kid's game of football, and like obviously I'm completely ashamed to say that, but I simply found it incredibly hard to stop myself doing that and moaning, and that was obviously 100% down to speed. My ego, my arrogance of thinking I'm always right in that situation, but I couldn't stop doing it. And someone would have to tell me, go inside and not watch the game if that's what you're going to do. But no one would ever say that to me. There has to be.
But where does that come from? Like ultimately, then you need someone who's going to stamp it out, and it takes quite a big character to see someone that's in that situation. You're talking about emotion, like your emotions take over, for someone to then come up to you and say, "Go on, then off you go."
No, but I think like if a club does that, like if there's a club that are constantly abusing referees, as it were, they should not be able to play, because they've come to a point where there is no game in grassroots
But
football.
the FA are trying now. The FA are like doing all these campaigns. You see even TV adverts. Like I remember the one with, was it Ray Winstone in, like there's stuff that they've done and these campaigns to try and do that. Like the FA have a zero tolerance to that. But when it's the actual ref on a game, and it's like I referenced a couple of weeks ago when we did the podcast around, it was that 14-year-old girl that was the referee. She was never going to have the confidence to go up to the parents to say, that's unacceptable, I'm reffing the game, absolutely doesn't happen, or you get sent off. Like how are you ever going to stop it? Surely it has to come from the top to then come down, and you see it on TV, and then like that just doesn't happen within Premier League football, and then because everyone just copies, don't they? You go to a game, and when the manager then comes out after the game and speaks about it, when they speak about it on Monday Night Football and they batter the ref.
But I just don't think that's the issue in terms of like what it is like it comes from the players, doesn't it, on the pitch, and the people on the side of the pitch. It's never ever going to change, is it, at all? People in a crowd, 30,000 people supporting their club.
Yeah.
Referee makes a mistake, everyone's going to shout and moan at them. That's never ever going to change, isn't it? Regardless of what they do with the manager.
Unfortunately, I think.
So why does that not happen? Why does that not happen in rugby? Because there's that.
But I think
blows my mind.
I think
it
the fans,
does.
The fans probably
But
do.
it's the players.
Yeah.
I think there was a guy who's just retired from the rugby, done the World Cup final, who got all sorts of abuse from the French fans because he was obviously officiating when they went out. So I think that isn't different. Obviously, it's not the same culture to football. Rugby is a different sport, but I think they still get enough stick from the crowd and whatnot. The question is, grassroots referees shouldn't be abused while they're reffing, isn't it? And I don't know how that's ever going to stop
unless
something's put in place where teams can't play.
So it's probably in the moment, I don't think you can do anything about it, because, like you said, the 14-year-old girl's not going to go up to the bloke and say, "Sorry, sir, can you go off?" Shouldn't have to either. No. I think that what has to be in place is something like retrospective. So then that 14-year-old girl, what she could do is she could go to the FA or go to the governing body, whatever it might be, and issue a fine. Because ultimately, then it's like there has to be punishment. And if the punishment can't be in the moment, and obviously you'd love to nip it in the bud at that point, but if the follow up is that then there's some sort of penalty that, like you said, they shouldn't be able to play, or there should be a fine, or there should be something to then stop it, because there has to be a deterrent. And if the deterrent can't be on the day, it should be then retrospective, I think.
It's the experience, though, isn't it, of that 14-year-old girl, the experience she's had, and thinking, "Oh, I ain't going to do that again."
Yeah, it's awful.
And you lose so many of referees, and I think that's the biggest sort of challenge, that in 20 years' time, there's not going to be any referees.
That's why
grassroots football then falls apart, because the only person that refs is one of the coaches, and then that turns a bit farcical, and it's not a proper game as such. I think the biggest fear is, how does the game carry on if we lose a high percentage of the referees?
Yeah, it doesn't. Well, that's what I mean about, because it's okay for the top level to do it at the moment. So you see on the pitch, you see the manager after the game, you see them speaking about it on Monday Night Football, because it's okay there. That's what then just follows down through into grassroots. It's the same. We speak about it all the time. Like, you're coaching a session and you see one of the kids put their arm up when they're about to take a corner. It means nothing. They've just seen their idol do it. And whilst that's still happening at the very top level of the game...
So it's both. It's both. It has to come from both ends.
Do you see that as much now on the TV? In my eyes, in the past 10 years, that doesn't happen anywhere near as much in terms of players surrounding referees, moaning at referees.
So I think that wasn't it. Like, players surrounding the ref.
They've tried to, and last season they obviously started to give a yellow card if you were the third person to like surround the referee. Like, that was even the rule around that was quite unclear at the time.
But in my eyes, the problem within grassroots football is worse than the problem within top-level league football.
So, like you said, if there has been a shift and there has been an improvement with the professional game, then that is because of a deterrent and a penalty. So that for me is the only way. It's all you can do. Like, other than that, I can't really think of anything.
No,
like that, and I think that's worth a try.
I think, look, we're obviously all in agreement that it's a disgrace.
James, after your agreement with that?
We're obviously all in agreement that it's a disgrace that referees starting out throughout grassroots football are getting abuse from, whether it be players, coaches, parents. It's like absolutely unacceptable. Unfortunately, I think we're probably all in agreement that there's not a clear and obvious intervention that can be made to stamp that out, especially quickly anyway. And it may be something that obviously the FA are working hard at and trying to stamp out, but unfortunately it feels like there isn't an answer. I mean, I'd love for any of the listeners to come in, if they've got any suggestions, to fire them in for us to maybe speak about on a future podcast. But I mean, I can't think of anything obvious that can make a big difference quickly.
I think if there was one, it would have happened a long time ago.
Yeah,
interesting debate. He is hoping that we see improvements and we can get something in place to see the experience become much more positive for particularly young referees that are coming 100%. Into the game. Okay, guys, let's finish off with a couple of listener questions.
Love to.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Okay then, first question of the day. I'll aim it to you first, Johnny. Do you think kids should wear black boots only?
This it's interesting. This is something that was discussed, I think it was on my UEFA B, maybe my UEFA A, when I did that course, that one of the clubs, and I won't say who they are, but one of the clubs, all of their children within their academy had to wear black boots, and they were quite strong on it, that it was a real professional thing to do, to wear black boots. I'm like completely the opposite. I want children within my sessions to express themselves, and a lot of them do that through the boots that they wear. So they've got pink boots, purple boots, bright, multicoloured, whatever it may be. I sort of encourage that, and the kids then come into the to the game. They're so keen to show it off. So I think, for me, I think kids should be able to wear whatever
It's a
they
bit
want.
old school, isn't it, really? Like, I think there's probably a point in time where I thought that, and now I sort of look back and be like, what are you thinking? Ultimately, how can you say you got to wear black boots, but when you get 1v1 with a defender, make sure you try to step over and try and beat your man and cross it. We're teaching kids to express themselves, and the best way of doing that, the world's changed, and I think that kids should absolutely wear the lairiest boots they can possibly find.
Chaddy, you're obviously quite old, and you've
Boys.
and you've gone through the journey probably where you were made to wear black. Definitely gone through a few pairs of boots, but were you ever made to wear black boots during your career?
I think I am actually that old. When I was sort of coming through, you could only get
brown.
Lace up ones. You should wear one of them balls with the laces in your head when you headed it. No, I would always wear black boots because that's all that I could get. I think when I was when all the Larry boots come out, I used to wear white ones because they would make me feel like I could run faster. I'm not sure if that was the case or not. But I
think it's scientifically proven that you run faster in white boots. Yeah. You're right, mate.
More skillful in red.
That's why I went wrong there. But I think these days it's more or less impossible to get hold of a pair of black boots. They're all like all these crazy colours. So each to their own, and like you say, the opportunity to express yourself.
Yep,
take
spot
it.
on.
And let me see. Good one for you, James. You'll like this one.
Oh no.
How can I get involved with the Football Fun Factory?
You already are.
No, it's not from me.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So I don't really know the root of the question. If that's a parent, then how can you get your child involved with the Football Fun Factory? On a website, put your postcode in, find your nearest session from 2 years old to 12 years old. If it's from a coach, which I suspect it might be, then it's our head coaches who are franchisees. They operate across the country. There's 80 different franchises, about 350 different assistant coaches, loads of assistant coaching roles, or indeed, if you're from an area where the Football Fun Factory doesn't yet exist, then you can become a head coach and bring those experiences to your local community. So loads of ways to get involved, and we are a welcoming organisation that loves to grow and develop. We're trying to put football fun on the doorsteps of children across the nation, as we always say, and we'd love to hear from anyone that wants to get involved, and you can do that again via our website.
Great stuff. And one final question directed to you, Johnny. I've got a message here. Hi, Johnny. I love your content on social media.
Why you got this with such a smile on your face?
I can't believe it. I don't know if I think you've sent it in. That's what I'm saying. I love his content on social media. Coaches an under-7s team with a couple of kids that don't do as the coach says. No. Have you got any tips and advice on that?
I've got loads of tips and advice.
Black boots.
Black boots only. So I think there isn't, I always say this, there isn't one answer that solves behaviour like that. You can't just suddenly change one thing and make everyone behave beautifully. But I think one thing that I always try and do within my session is use positive reinforcement. So if a child is misbehaving, then actually focus on the ones that are behaving in the way that you want them to, and notice and praise those, and that will then influence those that aren't. I think the reason the child may be misbehaving is because they want your attention. So it's important that you don't give them your attention when they are misbehaving, and actually then showcase those that are. If it then sort of goes beyond that and they're still not sort of behaving as you'd like them to within your session, then what I would do within mine is get the children playing, pull that child or two children to the side, away from everyone else. So while the session's still going on, get down to their level, make eye contact with them, and explain that their behaviour is unacceptable. And it's really important to separate them and their behaviour. If you say, James, you're really naughty, then James thinks he's really naughty, and he'll then keep playing up to that. Where if I go to you, James, you're behaving in this way, and when you do, it is unacceptable, it is naughty. You need to make sure that you don't, so he can then understand that he can separate his behaviour and him himself. But I've got loads more tips like that. So if you aren't following me on social media, you can check out Coach Johnny FFF.
I tell you what would be good as well, John, the Facebook group.
Yes, so we've got a Facebook group which is open to all coaches. So you can see that in the link in my bio, or just type in Facebook Children's Coaching Football Fun Factory. It will come up and you can see that. And there's loads more tips that we share. Great plug, Johnny. Fantastic stuff. Love it, guys. Great chat. Thank you for joining us again. We'll be back really soon with another episode of the Football Fun Factory podcast.